Most of the time on In the Money by Zerodha, we are in a serious mode. We talk about markets, money, investing, data, things that demand focus, attention, and usually a fair bit of mental bandwidth. And December should be different. The year starts winding down, volumes thin out, calendars suddenly have empty slots, and for once, many of us can afford to slow down a little. So instead of another deep dive, I thought I'd take a small detour. Because if you think about it, some of the most powerful lessons that stay with us come from stories and not necessarily from data or charts. From films that explore greed and ambition, power and excess, risk-taking, moral trade-offs, and the psychology of people operating under pressure. In this episode, I'm putting together a movie watch list of films that revolve around money, markets, and systems built around them. Movies that are entertaining first but quietly leave you thinking even after. Think of this as a relaxed end-of-the-year watch list you can enjoy over the holidays. No charts, no numbers, but still very much about money and how people behave around it. I'm your host Sandeep Rao, and today we are stepping away from the terminals into the theaters to look at markets through the lens of stories. Just to set expectations right, this episode is strictly about movies. No documentaries, no docuseries, no TV shows. I'll do a separate episode just for those later. Before we get started, here's what you can expect from the episode. As I mentioned earlier, I've picked up only feature films, no documentaries, no series. I have grouped them into 5 broad categories. The first category covers films based on the 2008 global financial crisis. The second looks at greed, scams, and the psychology of Wall Street. The third focuses on niche concepts and corporate warfare. This is where things get a bit nerdy. The fourth category is dedicated to Indian films centered around stock markets. And then we have an all and sundry bucket. In total, I'll be covering 16 films. No spoilers, I promise. At the end of the episode, I'll also rank these movies across 3 dimensions. 1. Learning value, that is, what insights or skills does the movie teach? Then realism score, that is, how close it is to the real world behavior and outcomes. And lastly, trader relatability, that is, how much a trader or investor can see themselves in it. With that, let's begin. I'm starting with category 1, that is films around the 2008 global financial crisis. If you started trading or investing only in the last 5 years or so, I would strongly recommend watching each of these films on the 2008 global financial crisis. For me, 2008 was a pivotal moment in economic history. It fundamentally reshaped how monetary policy works and, more importantly, how those policies cascade through financial markets. Many of the market structures, interventions, and distortions we live with today trace their roots back to that period. These films help us understand why the world of money looks the way it does today. Let's start with the film Too Big to Fail. Too Big to Fail is based on the book of the same name by Andrew Ross Sorkin, one of my favorite New York Times columnists. The film centers on the collapse of Lehman Brothers and the cascading effects that followed across the global financial system. Rather than focusing on traders or specific trades, it looks at the crisis from a policy and institutional lens. At the heart of the narrative are 3 key figures who shaped the rescue efforts: US Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson, Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke, and New York Fed President Tim Geithner. The film captures the urgency, uncertainty, and the trade-offs involved in making decisions when there were no good options, only less bad ones. On a related note, in the film at one point, Hank Paulson says, "There is not a bank in the world that has enough money in its vault to pay its depositors." That dialogue made me go through the monetary economics rabbit hole to understand how banks and central banks work. Anyways, back to the film. And this is a must-watch if you want a broad, high-level understanding of how policy decisions played a central role in stabilizing the economy and why post-2008 financial world looks the way it does today. My ratings for this film are, in terms of learning value, 9 out of 10, realism score, again 9 out of 10, and trader relatability at 5 out of 10. The next film on my list is Margin Call. In this film, we move from macro to micro, from central bank policy decisions to a Wall Street investment bank. The film is written and directed by J.C. Chander, whose father was a Wall Street investment banker. Solid star cast that includes Jeremy Irons, Kevin Spacey, Demi Moore, and Stanley Tucci. It revolves around risk management models and how it's all based on assumptions that we feed into the model. But woven along with it are the firm's dynamics between the CEO and analyst and the board of directors as they take critical decisions to manage bad assets in their books. The film overall gives an idea of internal dynamics that may play out inside an investment bank during a crisis situation. One dialogue that stood out for me when the CEO John Tull, played by Jeremy Irons, says, "There are 3 ways to make a living in this business. Be first, be smarter, or cheat." And I don't cheat. My ratings for this one: learning value 8 out of 10, realism score 10 of 10, trader relatability again 10 of 10. Third and the final film in this category, and maybe the most widely watched, is The Big Short. The film is adapted from the book of the same name by Michael Lewis, another financial journalist whose work I deeply admire. Solid cast again: Christian Bale, Steve Carell, Ryan Gosling and Brad Pitt. The story unfolds through multiple parallel narratives that converge on the 2008 global financial crisis. It follows 3 distinct threads. Michael Burry, the hedge fund manager who identifies the structural fragility of the US housing market well ahead of time. Then we have Jared Vennett, based on Deutsche Bank's Greg Lippmann, one of the first bankers to truly grasp Burry's insight. And finally, a small firm called Brownfield Fund, inspired by Cornwall Capital and its founders, who stumbled upon Vennett's presentation and recognized the opportunity it presented. Now, what makes Big Short one of my favorites is its gripping, fast-paced storytelling combined with cleverly embedded explainers that break down complex financial concepts without spoiling the narrative. It's both educational and entertaining, rare for a film dealing with derivatives and systemic risk. A definite must-watch and one that deserves perhaps a repeat viewing. Christian Bale's performance as Michael Burry in The Big Short is a masterclass in quiet, socially awkward intensity that turns a numbers-obsessed guy into the film's unlikely hero. He transformed the movie into a cult classic by portraying the outsider who wins through an obsessive, data-driven conviction. On a personal note, the film also highlights a remarkable willingness of the American financial system to innovate in ways that allow investors like Burry to express a negative view on the market. By persuading banks to create credit default swaps on specific mortgage products, he was able to place a bet on the looming mortgage crisis. It's a reminder of how flexible and mature those markets are, and we still have a long way to go. My ratings on this one in terms of learning value: 10 out of 10, realism score 8 out of 10, trader relatability 9 out of 10. With that, we come to the end of this category focused on global financial crisis of 2008. The next category focuses on scams, greed and human psychology. In financial markets, scams are hardly a new phenomenon. Whether in India or the US, there will always be actors attempting to game the system, and regulators will have to remain in a constant battle to contain them. The first film in this category is the 1987 classic Wall Street. Much like J.C. Chander, director Oliver Stone drew heavily from personal experience. His father was a stockbroker and an investment analyst on the Wall Street. That proximity to the world of finance likely explains the film's authentic tone and sharp observations. At the center of the story is the iconic Gordon Gekko, played by Michael Douglas, a legendary Wall Street figure, often said to be a composite character inspired by real-life market personalities, ranging from Ivan Bosky, the stock trader later convicted for insider trading, to elements from Carl Icahn and others from Stone's father's era. The film is fundamentally about insider trading, and more broadly, it serves as a critique of the excesses of 1980s Wall Street. It explores moral compromises and conflicts that arise in the relentless pursuit of wealth and status. Its most famous line,
"Greed, for lack of a better word, is good,"
was directly inspired by a remark made by Ivan Bosky and has since become one of the most enduring quotes in the world of finance. A good watch if you want a cinematic take on the 80s Wall Street. My ratings for this one is, in terms of learning value, 7 out of 10, realism score 7 out of 10, trader relatability 8 out of 10. The next film in the category is Boiler Room, which was released in the year 2000. Writer and director Ben Younger drew inspiration from real-life experience. An interview he attended at a brokerage firm, which led him to spend nearly 2 years researching the underground telemarketing and penny stock industry before completing the screenplay. The film centers on a brokerage operation running classic pump and dump schemes, what we would commonly refer to as operators in the Indian market context. True to its subject, Boiler Room has a crazy aggressive energy that is usually the case with such operations, capturing both the temptation and the ugliness of quick money. My ratings here in terms of learning value 9 out of 10, realism score 9 out of 10, trader relatability again 9 out of 10. Another film that fits naturally alongside Boiler Room is the biographical drama The Wolf of Wall Street, which was based on Jordan Belfort's 2007 memoir. While Boiler Room focuses on micro-level fraud, penny stocks, cold calls, and the exploitation of small retail investors, The Wolf of Wall Street operates at a much more macro scale. The lens is wider, covering large IPOs, institutional money, and the extravagant lifestyle that often accompany unchecked success in a bull market. Leonardo DiCaprio's performance as Jordan Belfort is an absolute masterclass in how raw energy can turn a white-collar criminal into a rock star cult leader. On a side note, the film draws directly from real events, most notably the IPO of the shoe company Steve Madden and the extensive securities fraud carried out through Belfort's firm Stratton Oakmont. As much as I like Steve Madden's shoes, I was completely unaware of this side of the story until I watched The Wolf of Wall Street. My ratings for this one are 6 out of 10 for learning value, 5 out of 10 realism score, and trader relatability 7 out of 10. The final film in this category is the 2017 HBO drama The Wizard of Lies, based on the book of the same name by New York Times financial journalist Diana B. Henriquez. The film centers on Bernie Madoff, played by the legendary actor Robert De Niro, the architect of one of the largest Ponzi schemes in history with an estimated loss of nearly $65 billion. Beyond the scale of the fraud itself, the narrative focuses on the human dimension of the collapse, particularly Madoff's family. His wife and 2 sons were closely involved in the business, and the film depicts the moment when Madoff reveals to them that the entire asset management operation was built on total deception. The Wizard of Lies shifts the focus from financial mechanics and makes us think about the human cost and trauma of not just the ones affected, but the preparators as well. I think it makes for a sobering end to this category. Here's another fact. Did you know Madoff served as Nasdaq's chairman between 1990 and 1993? I didn't. On a different note, I remember when I was reading the book The Man Who Sold the Market, which is about Jim Simons, talks about the fact that Madoff's returns immediately raised red flags for him because they were implausibly smooth. In Simon's view, no legitimate trading strategy can generate such consistent profits without volatility. And it seems Simons pulled out his investments from Madoff right before the 2008 crash. My ratings on this one: learning value 7 out of 10, realism score 8 out of 10, trader relatability 6 out of 10. Over to the third category of films. This one gets a bit niche and nerdy at times. The first on the list is the 1990 film Rogue Trader, a biographical film based on the life of derivatives trader Nick Leeson and the 1995 collapse of the Barings Bank. Leeson was then heading the futures and options operations for Barings Bank at the then CIMEX, which is Singapore International Monetary Exchange. The film centers around how Nick Leeson used an error accounting system to hide his losses, and yes, it was a short straddle trade on the Japanese stock exchange that hit the final nail in the coffin. My ratings for this one in terms of learning value 9 out of 10, realism score 9 out of 10, trader relatability 10 out of 10. The next on the list is a 1993 film The Barbarians at the Gate. It's a comedy film based on the book by the same title by Brian Burrow and John Helias, which in turn was based on a series of articles written by the authors for the Wall Street Journal. The story centers on F. Ross Johnson, the CEO of RJR Nabisco, who planned to buy out the rest of the Nabisco shareholders. Johnson, however, is opposed by 2 pioneers of this thing called LBO or leverage buyout. In a broad sense, LBO is the acquisition of a company using significant portion of borrowed money, that is leverage, to fund the acquisition, with the remainder of the purchase price funded with private equity. My ratings for this one: learning value 8 out of 10, realism score 8 out of 10, trader relatability 4 out of 10. Then there's another comedy drama from 1983, Trading Places. Eddie Murphy plays Bill Ray, a street beggar and a conman. While the film is set within a commodities brokerage firm, its real focus is the age-old debate of nature versus nurture and the role that luck and opportunities plays in shaping a person's life. In that sense, when I watched the film, it reminded me of the 1964 musical My Fair Lady. More recently, during a podcast conversation with Tom Bazzo, he spoke about orange juice futures, and it struck me that Trading Places was actually where I first heard about it. All that aside, it's a genuinely fun watch. My ratings: learning value 8 out of 10, realism score 8 out of 10, trader relatability 4 out of 10. Next on the list is the 2016 film Equity, a grounded and realistic portrayal of life inside investment banking. The story follows Naomi Bishop, a senior investment banker, navigating the high-stakes dynamics of taking a company public, and explores how the actions of those closest to her, particularly her boyfriend and her assistant, intersect with the IPO process, ultimately leading to serious professional and personal consequences. My ratings on this one: learning value 7 out of 10, realism score 8 out of 10, trader relatability 5 out of 10. The last two films in this category are 2018 film The Hummingbird Project, which is loosely narrated around the idea of laying a fiber optic cable from one place to another to reduce the latency for high frequency trading. Michael Lewis's book Flash Boys is also about that. My ratings for this one: learning value 8 out of 10, realism score 7 out of 10, trader relatability 5 out of 10. Next, we have an Australian financial thriller, The Bank, a 2001 release that blends mathematics, ethics, and social consequences. The film is about Jim Doyle, a brilliant but reclusive mathematician who develops a market prediction system. The story is about what happens when a CEO of a bank hires him with a goal to boost profits. My ratings in terms of learning value: 6 out of 10, realism score 5 out of 10, trader relatability 3 out of 10. That brings me to the end of category 3. The next category focuses on Hindi language films from India. All three films in this list are in one way or another inspired by the life and events surrounding Harshad Mehta. The first is the 2006 film Ghafla, which is directly based on the 1992 Harshad Mehta scam and offers a relatively grounded portrayal of the events that shook the Indian financial system. My ratings for this one: learning value 7 out of 10, realism score 7 out of 10, trader relatability again 7 out of 10. The next is the 2018 film Bazaar, starring Saif Ali Khan, Radhika Apte and Chitrangada Singh. The film follows Rizwan, a young man who comes to Mumbai and begins working under the charismatic and powerful stockbroker Shakun Kothari, loosely modeled on Harshad Mehta, and traces how ambition, power and greed shape his journey. Among all the films discussed so far, this one is easily the most masaledar, full-blown Bollywood-style movie, complete with dramatic flair and even a Yo-Yo Honey song track. My ratings for this one: learning value 6 out of 10, realism score 5 out of 10, trader relatability 3 out of 10. Finally, there is the 2021 film The Big Bull, in which Abhishek Bachchan portrays Harshad Mehta, with Ileana D'Cruz playing a character inspired by the journalist Sucheta Dalal. The film charts Mehta's rise from the chawls of Mumbai to becoming the big bull of the Bombay Stock Exchange in the early 1990s, capturing both his meteoric ascent and the controversy that followed. Now, I know what you must be thinking. The Scam 1992 series starring Pratik Gandhi is way better, but here I'm looking only at movies. My ratings for this one: learning value 6 out of 10, realism score 5 out of 10, trader relatability 6 out of 10. That brings me to the final set of films. Now, these didn't fit neatly into any of the earlier categories, so I've grouped them together under an all and sundry section. The first is the 2016 film The Accountant, starring Ben Affleck. It follows Christian Wolff, an autistic certified public accountant who works as a forensic accountant for criminal organizations, uncovering and uncooking the books. It's worth noting that this is very much an action thriller rather than a trading or markets focused film, but it still touches on themes of financial opacity and accounting manipulation. The last film in this group is The Laundromat, a 2019 film, an American comedy drama based on Jake Bernstein's book Secrecy, which examines the Panama Papers scandal. It features a strong cast including Meryl Streep, Antonio Banderas, and Sharon Stone. The film highlights how complex offshore structures and shell companies are used to hide wealth and obscure accountability across borders. That brings me to the final tally of all the ratings. We have covered 16 movies plus 2 extra or bonus movies. If we look at the total score, the top 3 slots are taken by Margin Call and Rogue Trader, which have a tie, and then we have The Big Short and The Boiler Room. Now, if you ask me as to which is my favorite, I'd pick The Wizard of Lies for acting, The Big Short for learning value, and The Wolf of Wall Street for full-on entertainment, or a masala movie as we call it in India. From a nerdiness perspective, The Hummingbird Project is excellent. So that's pretty much from me. I hope you enjoyed this offbeat episode. You have a wonderful holiday season. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.